Hi, my forget-me-nots. Sleeping lady. ASMR. Thank you for stopping by and visiting for some tea and story time. Story time. I have milk tea right here. So please wind down, chill, and relax. We are going to be diving in to a story, a legend, a folktale called Legend of Sleeping Lady. And that's actually how I got my channel name, was a mountain of the sleeping lady. That's one of my favorite mountains. I adore that mountain, and I thought I was so clever because I thought it also fit with ASMR because it's the sleeping lady, and I'm from Alaska. But let's dive in. This story is Legend of Sleeping Lady. There's the water and the mountain that is shaped like this. I got it from a library. So wind down, and get comfortable. Get comfortable. While we get reading. Okay. Written and illustrated by Mildred Jacobson. Now, there is couple of stories on how people remember the legend or the folk tale of the sleeping lady. Different tribes, different regions have their own folk tale or legend or story about it, but I found 2 books that have their own twist of the Sleeping Lady Mountain. But I'm going to be reading this one in particular by Mildred Jacobson. So let us start reading about Sleeping Lady. A Legend of Sleeping Lady. It was late summer in the great land, and the sun was low in the sky, for the day was nearly spent. Susitna sat on a rocky cliff where she could watch the sea and wait for Nikatla. The tide was coming in, and the waves were pounding and crashing against the rocks. Below the cliff, Susitna loved this beautiful spot. Purple Shadows were beginning to touch the tall trees and the heavy bushes. Flowers splashed their bright colors everywhere. Berries bursting with juicy goodness were ready for picking. The land was rich and warm. A saber-toothed tiger padding silently through the shadows avoided the herd of short-tempered woolly mammoths. There were other smaller animals to be stalked. The tiger's golden eyes watched Susitna as she sat. Another figure was hastening toward her. He was carrying a basket filled with wild beach strawberries, sweet from the sun. Susitna watched Nikatla as he came closer. She looked at his face, and smile touched her lips. How she loved this handsome lad. Nikatla sat down to catch his breath. "We'll start back to the village as soon as I'm rested," he said. "Someone has made up a new dance," he told Susitna. "And we want to practice it tonight." Looking at the girl near him, Nikatla marveled at her beauty. Like a flower, he thought, as he gazed at her smooth olive skin. The faint flush of color in her cheeks reminded him of a wild rose. Her eyes were as soft and dark as the midnight sky, and her hair, heavy and thick, was as black as a raven's glossy wing. Everyone loved her for truly Susitna was the most beautiful maiden of all. They stood up and, holding hands, started back to their village. That evening they joined in the singing and dancing games of the people. Susitna and Nikatla were great favorites, for their deep devotion to each other made everyone else feel warm and loved. Warm and loved. Susitna and Nikatla lived in the great land thousands of years before our ancestors arrived here. They belonged to a race of giant people who roamed over every part of Alaska. In those days, it was warm, and great trees with every kind of fruit grew here. The people did not have to work very hard for what they needed. This gave them much time to devote to songs and dances and the telling of many stories. They were a happy people, especially those that lived near a slender stretch of water that reached in from the sea. Then one terrible day, dread news came to the valley. A stranger appeared and brought word that the fierce, warlike tribe to the north had decided to wage war against the gentle inlet people. The inlet giants gathered together. in council. What could they do? They didn't want war. They were peaceful, and until now, happy. They wanted to keep it that way. Finally, the oldest man of the village lifted his hands for attention. The people gazed at the somber faces of the elders and listened as the old man announced the council's decision. All the men, young and old, would go north to talk to the warring tribe. They must try to convince them that the war was cruel and destructive, that they should all try to live in harmony. Ilakuluta is meaning harmony in my language. Ilakuluta, ilakuluta. Also, we work together. That's what it means in my language. Ilakuluta, ilakuluta. Which also means harmony. This is so, the people said. It is the only thing to do, so preparations were made for the fearful journey north. 2 mornings later, the men were ready to leave. Nakatla looked in Susitna's dark eyes. Together they gazed out over the long, narrow inlet. He told her that he wanted her to wait. He wanted her to wait for him in this spot for his return, for his return, for his return. He would hurry back as fast as he could and would meet her here. Looking into his beloved face, Susitna promised that she would be there waiting. Embracing for the last time, Nakatla joined the other men. With tear-filled eyes, Susitna and the others of the village watched them leave. When the sounds of the men's voices faded and they could no longer be seen, the young girl hurried to her home. She gathered a few things she would need, then sped back to begin her vigil. Many days and many nights passed, and Susitna grew weary. She no longer enjoyed weaving baskets or picking berries. Her work lay discarded beside her. It would not hurt to close my eyes and rest a moment, she told herself. But she was so tired that when she lay down on the ground, sleep quickly overcame her. Meanwhile, the men had arrived at the warring tribe's village. They petitioned for peace, but their plea was met with a swift and terrible answer. The battle was fierce and short. The men of peace, unaccustomed to fighting, were overpowered and made prisoner. Many had died. While Susitna slept, word of the disaster drifted down to the waiting families. Nakatla's name was on everyone's lips. He too has fallen. They mourned. When the woman went to carry the sad news to Susitna, they could not bring themselves to awaken this beautiful girl, so young and so in love. How could they shield her from the dread news? They asked each other, "Let her sleep. We will not tell her these sad things now." So they wove a blanket of grass and sprinkled it with wild flowers. Wild flowers. Gently they draped it over Susitna's sleeping form. What do we do when she awakens? They asked sadly. They felt so helpless. Let us pray to the gods, they said. And this they did. They did. They did. They did. Then the old women returned to their homes, leaving the beautiful Susitna slumbering quietly by the inlet. The prayers of the woman reached the heavens and were answered, but their land and their lives were changed by the god's answer. Susitna went into a deep sleep, and the air grew cold. That evening, Alaska had her first snowfall. First, Alaska had her first snowfall. Slowly it came down, a few flakes at a time. For 7 days it fell until Susitna was covered by this blanket of pure white, 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 white snow. Days and months turned into years. Years turned into centuries. And still, Susitna slept. Her people disappeared and new people moved into the great land. The great fruit trees died and fell into the ground. Willows appeared, and shortly the firs and cottonwoods joined them. Birches struggled for growth in the cool air, began a northward trend and stopped at the shores one of the great rivers. The woolly mammoth added his bones to the decayed remains of the great trees. The lynx replaced the saber-toothed tiger in its endless quest for food. A new and different life had taken over. Now, new eyes now watch Susitna, for even today she can still be seen. In the summer she is covered by her flowered green blanket. Tiny birds called to her to come pick the sweet wild strawberries on the beach, but she no longer hears them. The snow comes each year as it has done for centuries. The snow comes each year as it has done for centuries. It covers the green and the flowers, and Susitna sleeps still, waiting for Nikatla. There are some who say that when the warring people change and the whole world is at peace, Nikatla will return to awaken his sleeping lady. And this is how it looks. And that is a legend of sleeping lady. It's quite sad, but ever since I was a little girl, I loved hearing the story, and I always admired because it actually looks like a sleeping lady. I love watching the mountain to this day, and that's why it's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorite mountains to this day, as I said before, or a couple of times. But it looks so beautiful, sunrise and sunset. I love taking pictures of her when it's at the sunset. And for some reason, she looks really farther away in some places and then very close and big in some angles of Anchorage. I don't know how that works. Shh. I always wondered, I know it's perception or angles of some places, but I feel like when I'm by the water at a park, at this park by the airport, there's water and then we can see her straight on, but for some reason she looks farther there. But when I'm closer into like the inlet, or the when she's closer in like the interior more part of Anchorage, she looks big. I don't know how it looks. I don't know why the perception to me sometimes looks, I'm confused by that, but I'm pretty sure it's, the levitation of the water, the lands, or of that sort. But yeah, in my opinion, in some places, yeah, she does look bigger and more closer, but in some places, even though like it's closer to the water, it looks farther. I just want to share that. And if you go on the homepage of this channel, you can see a picture that I had taken of the sleeping lady. Sleeping lady. I hope you enjoyed that. That story. And thank you so excuse me. Thank you so much for visiting and having some tea with me and accepting that I tell you the story. It's a sad story, but I like the ending that it says, there are some who say that when the warring people change and the whole world is at peace, Nekatla will return to awaken his sleeping lady. I like that part. It gives a little bit of hope. To the legend and the story. So yes. Thank you for watching. Please, if you liked the video,